You're listening to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, where we discuss whatever the fuck we want to. And yes, we can put sex and drugs and Jesus all in the same bed and still be all right at the end of the day. My name is Vane, and I'll be interviewing guests from every corner of this world as we dig into topics that are too risque for the morning show, as we strive to help you understand what's really going on in your life. There is nothing off the table, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right into this episode. Hello, all my children, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. In today's episode, John M. Verner from the Cult of Christianity podcast is back with us, along with Miss Patrice, and they're here to help me navigate a deep discussion into my new book, which is called Don't Call Me a Christian. What does that word even mean? This book is completely free and it can be found at my website, sexdrugsandjesus.com. In this episode, we're going to talk a lot about the effects of religious trauma, whether or not the word Christian is really worth it, the birth of the Bible, and just so many things. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm your host with the most, Savannah, and I have with me the wonderful and great, incredible, beautiful Patrice. And then we also have the powerful and very well learned and educated John M. Verner. How are y'all doing today?
We're doing well. What about you? Good to hear you.
I am marvelous, darling, and living my best life. Everything's just gonna get better from here on out.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, y'all are both in the greater Atlanta area, and I think that is really, really cool. How's the weather over there today?
Rainy.
Yeah. It's overcast.
Yeah.
Just kind of a day.
It's been rather warm, which is great, but the past 2 days it's been very, very rainy.
Yeah. Just about. Yeah.
That's how spring
What's up with
began.
you?
Like partly cloudy, no rain in the forecast. So I've been out there, personally watering my garden and everything. But what was I going to say about Atlanta?
And it's the best.
We will circle back to Tyler Perry Studios in just a moment. I was about to dare to do like a tie-in before we explained everything, because I really, really, really like talking about Tyler Perry. But we'll circle back in just a second. So on today's show, everybody, we want to be talking about this new book that I wrote. It's called Don't Call Me a Christian. What does that word even mean? And John has read it. Patrice has read it. And they're going to let me have it one way or the other and tell me if they really, really hated it or really, really couldn't get enough of it. And hopefully they got the point. And so, is there anything that y'all would like to tell people about your own personal background, history, or anything like that before we get into the book?
For me, I'm actually born Catholic, Roman Catholic. I've deviated from it over the years. I am way past 50 and, have lots of questions that have not been answered by the church. John, you have anything to jump in and say?
Yeah. So if you all have heard me before, basically I studied to be a pastor, and then through various stories left the faith myself, and now, do a lot of work to investigate cults and religions. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. So I'm excited to get into this.
Great.
Okay. So let's hop right into it. Let's take a look at the book cover. I pride myself on designing very enigmatic book covers that are polarizing. I want to know what each of you thought of it, and if you picked up on the points I was trying to make. Or did it all just kind of look like it was thrown together?
Nothing ever looks thrown together. It looks like you put a lot of thought into it. I honestly get a lot of almost like frustration and angst from the cover, but a weird sense of reverence too, because there's a lot of classically Christian imagery in it. I don't read too much into book covers. They say you shouldn't judge a book by it, so I didn't read too much into it, but I like it.
Thank you very much. What about you, Patrice?
I actually, now looking at it, strange enough, I am not a book cover person. I look at it just to see the name, and then I go right into its contents. Now looking at it, I'm seeing that there's, a lot of things you've put in it. So it's a visual manifestation of what you're thinking about the church, of old, of, you know, just some freedom on the bottom. There's just so much going on when you look at it. So I really did not see the effort, but now I do as you draw attention to it. There's a lot going on that I could actually accept, if that makes sense to you. I'm accepting everything that's there. It's not like it's just thrown together. It's purposely put.
Okay, when you say there's freedom on the bottom, what do you mean?
I'm looking at Bird in the cage,
Okay.
and he has freedom. So it's so many different moving parts that I'm actually looking at right now, that I'm seeing the body of, it's like there's blood, there's the chalice, there is, light, there is the dove, well, the bird, there's the freedom of the bird. That's my interpretation.
Right.
That's
So,
just mine.
you know what? You're spot on. That's exactly what I was going for with that bird. I view that cage as entrapment. You can call it the church, you can call it the dogma, you call it the mindset behind it. And you see that the cage is open, but the bird hasn't necessarily left yet.
Right. Correct.
Nobody puts a gun to our head and makes us go to said church or attend said religion or be a part of said denomination. And even though,
Right.
like when I was there was so much that I hated, I didn't like, I felt uncomfortable, and I compromised and I said, well, I'm just going to stay here anyway. But the church was not like the military. I couldn't leave the military when I wanted to, but I could have walked away from a church at any moment. Rather than do that, I stayed.
Correct.
Let's see, what else can I talk about? I'm not going
And
to
that,
talk about everything. Go ahead, Ms. Patrice. You want to say something?
no, I said that's exactly what, you're seeing in this. When you look at it, you do have that freedom to leave, but then you also put in the spider webs. That is just showing that, that it's something that's old. It's something that's, I wouldn't say crusty, but it's just, we have just fell into such a funk that we're not going to leave. We're going to leave everything as it is, even if it decays. So me looking at it now, I'm thinking, okay, it looks like there is a decay in the religion, but we still stay where we are. We're comfortable. We're safe. We're not going to move.
Hmm. And yet none of this was meant to be disrespectful to the church or Christianity or anything like that. But like
Mhm.
the whole, and this is technically like a kind of an altar, so to speak. And the whole premise of this, like you said, looks a little outdated. Like it's kind of like it's been setting there. The blood is very vibrant because it still works, but the webs and the whole, like the fog and everything represent the confusion that has entered into Christianity and kind of taken over it. And so that was the point of the book, was to talk about what a Christian really is and isn't, and the impacts that that dichotomy has had on the world.
Did you put the word Christian in blood font because of all the blood that's been that under the banner of Christian has been shed?
I was thinking more of what a horror show it's become, but the Crusades are the actual literal blood that has been shed, and then the mental and emotional blood that has been shed fit there too. This is a bloody business. This is a bloody business. Okay, so I'm gonna get more from you, Patrice, on like when you left the church. You said that you grew up Catholic, and then at some point, I know you took your kids out of the Catholic Church because of how the priests were and everything like that. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, growing up, we were staunch Catholics. You go Thursday evening, Sunday morning, you had to go to church. It was the stand up, sit down, kneel down, the same thing, just, over and over and over. There was not very much understanding. It was just whatever was, spoken to you or told to you, you believe. There was no, you did not ever question anything. Mass for me it was in Latin. So you barely understood it. You just went through the motion. I ended up having, you had to stay married to somebody in your religion as well. That's not part of the Roman Catholic Church, but it's part of being like a staunch Catholic. Moving along years after, we had kids, and we couldn't explain to our children what was the process of this going to church and religion, and we had no understanding to impart to our kids. We went on basically, let's say, a quest. So my husband and I went on this quest trying to understand the meaning of God through the church. We were in college. You stumble upon the block of history. You start going to history classes and they start teaching you a lot more about questioning God. We had no answer. So everywhere we turned to, we didn't get an answer. We didn't get an appropriate answer. What we got was verses, was the interpretation from the church of what we were trying to get. We didn't get like a full stop answer. It was just like a quest on to the next question. So we lost faith, and in turn, we couldn't put our kids on the same path that we were on. We were like like a little hamster. We were just on that little treadmill, just going around and around and around. How could we impart this to our kids? We did not know what to impart. We did not know the true meaning of Christianity to start. How could we become Catholics to end? We had no beginning and we had no end. We had no answers to question. We were just confused, frustrated, and at that point could not really in good faith continue this trend. We went nowhere, basically. I hope that answers it. It's, fundamentally what we had going on in our mind, but we never had an answer. And the answer you would get constantly would be somebody else's interpretation. It's not science. We understood it's not science. There's never a true, 1 + 1 is 2. It was somebody's interpretation of it. And it just didn't swing. And then along came the corruption being unraveled in the Catholic Church with, the priests, with all these things. It also cast another fear in our mind in that, you have sons and you don't know what could happen to them in the church, that we felt compelled at the time that this is not the place for us. We could just worship at home. And that's where we've been, and that's where we still are. We haven't moved our needle ahead at all. We're still in the same predicament, literally, maybe 20 years in. So I
John,
hope that helps.
John, anything you have to say about what she said?
Yeah, I'm just sorry for the experience of what I would call religious trauma, of being told that something is definitely true that doesn't make sense, and then being left with that confusion and being left with that feelings of like betrayal of trust, not just, interpersonally with people you might have met, but with like the whole system, you were told a story about how the world is, about how Christianity or Catholicism came about, and then meanwhile there was severe cover-ups going on, and that's something you can't just shake off and move on from. That can be very earth-shattering. So I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's like if you dig a little deeper into it, you start realizing that, it's at the same time they're trying to teach you Catholicism, but then they're also putting in Santa Claus, they put in the Easter Bunny, they put in all these things. So you have, as a child, a belief. You believe in these things. You really believe until that's shattered. And then you realize, okay, the only thing you had to support you at the time was religion. And then that becomes shattered. So what actually is true? Is there anything true? There's no truth to, basically, I feel like there's no truth to life, because everywhere along your way of, when you're an adolescent, when you're a child, you're an adolescent, you've been said all these different things that you unravel to be untrue. So now where is the truth? It has been dashed away from you and you can't recover it. So you now have to find a good support system in that, your spouse, who can actually have the same mindset as yourself, who can just say, look, just even if you turn away from the religion, still believe in God. And as I said, that's where we are. We just believe in God, but we don't believe in the religion, that's trying to put it together. It's like it's super gluing faults. So you just super glue all the faults in the world and bring it to us as a religion. Instead, we need to figure out what is actually true to ourselves and believe it, and just, I don't know the correct word,
What?
but
Why
I
do you?
just,
Why? Why do you?
sorry,
Why do you believe truth can't be recovered? Who do you believe owns truth?
we own our own truth. We have to own our own truth.
Well, to me, there's a difference between owning truth and discovering it. Discovery is more like a journey to discover knowledge. It almost sounds like you're saying because you no longer have a relationship with the church, truth is out of reach. Is that what you're saying?
No, actually, I'm saying, I don't know how to put it. I don't know how to put it. I'm sorry.
I can offer a perspective on this that
Yeah.
might be different than both of y'all's. But for one, I don't definitely believe in a God. I don't necessarily. I'm. If you want to call it agnostic, you can, but I don't think I need to believe in God personally. So for me, what truth boils down to is an unknowable thing, right? Like if we're talking in a with absolute certainty, no human being can know the truth behind all things. We will die believing some lies. But what is definitely possible is to discover certain things are more likely to be true than others in that sense. If you're using the word truth more as like a spiritual reality, a purpose, or something like that, that I
Mhm.
agree is very individualistic. But if we're talking about more truth in regards to like what really happened, what really happens, there are best guesses when we look back at history. There are best guesses when we look at what's going on right now. There are ways to verify things, and there is some science to it and there's some art to it, but it is possible. What the church has done that's really damaging to many, many people is warps their confidence in their abilities to actually know what is true. People can learn a lot of things, but churches need people to not learn a lot of things in order for their messaging to work. The more ignorant their congregation is, the easier they are to control for their own purposes. So that's the comment I wanted to put forth is I think not only does truth exist outside of the church, I think that's the only way you can get to truth is if you get outside of a church.
Correct.
Because the church
Correct.
because the church has an agenda. So Patrice, what I'd like to know is, do you think it's possible that your kids were molested before you got them out of the church?
No, not at all. The only reason I would say that, they were baptized into the church and they were maybe a week or 2 weeks old at the time. We got out of the church literally when they were about Yeah. Four, 3 and 4, and they were always with us.
Okay.
So, you know, I had that fear. So I don't think we even went past 3 or 4 years old when we couldn't answer questions for them because my truth started to be muddled when I started to have to tell them about, try to teach them, some of the prayers. And I was just doing it in rotation with my husband. We were just saying the same prayers over and over. Didn't understand what we were seeing. We had no clue. We had nothing to back up what we're seeing. Some we were even singing in Latin. So we did not know what to do. So I do not believe at the time that they would have been molested because of the fact that they were not in that church, left alone without us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's very refreshing to hear. Sometimes it happens, and we don't find out till like later. I didn't realize they were that young when you had taken them out. For some reason, I was thinking they were closer to their teens.
No.
So, you,
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
so you said you had some questions that you still have for the church. Now, John's a Bible scholar. He used to, be very high up in churches and stuff like that. Do you have a question you like to pose, and maybe he can help you with it?
Well, you know what? Let me start from the beginning. I have always questioned literally the, how do we get about to this Bible? Where did we start? That's my first question. Who wrote it? Is there any concrete evidence that what we have written is exactly what was said? That's my first thing because we are reading a Bible that is said to be God's, from God. But then we have interpretations of it. We have versions of it. We have different things. Things may have been lost in the, you know, conversion from language to language, all the predecessors of the languages. So things could have been changed. Things could have been lost. Things could have been inputted that weren't really there at the beginning.
I'll go ahead and just dive into that and say everything you're saying could have happened did happen. So there is no short way to answer how we got the Bible. That's 3-hour lecture type stuff because it's not one book. It's spans thousands of years of history. It wasn't assembled till somewhere between 100 AD and 300 AD. So there's a lot of question marks, and I'm not the biggest Bible expert. I know a lot. I read the original language and such, but if it could happen, it did happen. There were things taken out. There are things that were chosen. There were things that were not. There are things that have gone through at least one to three languages before we're even talking about English translations, when we're just talking about getting the original stuff together. Because you've got Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and Aramaic and all these things working together. So yeah, you're right to be skeptical of that. It is a mind-boggling thing. So for it to ever be presented as this was just written by God is, in my opinion, very reductive and very unfair. I think that's a bad way to look at the Bible.
Yeah, it truly is. So then okay, so if I start with that as being my platform, you realize I have nowhere to go because I don't have a solid base. So I have interpretation of something. I don't have the science behind it, which I'm sad to say, you feel that you need something solid to cast your own thoughts, your own beliefs on. And I don't have that solid base.
So what you're saying, like, this isn't like really just like a one pointed question. This is kind of like the overarching theme of like your whole grievance is that you just don't trust what you have to pull from. It's too corrupted.
Yeah. It's corrupted. It's corrupted over years, not corrupt in being, bad corruption. It's just interpretations have been corrupted or been changed to what's going on in our life right now, what's going on in the world right now. So you changed everything to be, more in a subtle way. You changed it so that it could conform with our new identity. So something back in 1940 is not applicable in 2023. So you just changed the religious aspect of it to conform to modernization, if that makes sense. We're just changing along the way. We're just going along. So we're on like a conveyor belt, and religion is along with us. As long as we keep going down the path, religion is going down with it. It's changing. It's evolving. It should have. It should be able to stand the test of time, which it's not able to do. So, there have another, problem in that what we have had in the past is no longer applicable to the present. So my belief today is not going to be the belief of somebody 50 years from now, because it's going to evolve again. It's going to change. As you said, we want to behave as if we're still learning from not just God, because I know, John, you don't believe that there is a God, but you believe that there is something like a being. There's something. That's the same thing I was learning in college, is that there is something, may not be a God. I just tend to hold on to it because my religion is still weighing me down and saying that there is a God, but there's something, just something out there. And I got to hold on to something or else I feel empty.
Right. So thank you for explaining all that. Now, the last question I have for you, then, John, if you care to talk about the way you parted from the church, then that's fine. If not, you don't have to. But both of y'all have completely different like ways that it happened. You were very studied and then you left. Patrice, you were under the Catholic education and then you left. So my question is, once you left the church, how did you continue your education? John already had plenty of education before he left the church. So since you took the church, out of the picture, how did you compensate for that?
For me, I just engaged in other activities. I guess engaged my kids. I engaged my other pastimes, my other hobbies, other things to fill the void, because there was nothing I could pour back into myself to make me really get back where I was. When you're young, you're just believe everything that people say until you have to pass that knowledge on to somebody else, to your kids, and then you realize you come up short. I came up short, did not know what to pass on, did not know what to do. So I walked away. I had nothing to fill the void with. I did not have a sense of purpose to go and find out for myself.
Okay.
I didn't have that, didn't have the resolve to want to do it, didn't want to do it.
Okay. So I bring this up to drive a point home. Many of us leave the church, get kicked out, whatever happens. And then, like the mistake I made when I got kicked out of Lakewood was I let that drive a wedge between me and God for years. And I should not have done that. So when we pull our kids out of the church, if we're not going to let the church teach them, then we've got to take up that mantle for ourselves. And
Well, I'll challenge that really quickly. Why is that bad for you to have a wedge there? Because you seem to I'm hearing a lot of like shame in this narrative of like when you leave church you should feel ashamed for it, or not church per se, but because the church hurt you, you should feel shame because you're less engaged with God. Well, who told you should feel that shame for being less engaged with God? I can't find that anywhere in the scripture I've read. So I would just want to challenge that's actually okay for you to not feel like you have to be engaged with God.
well, the thing is, she still was yearning for it, though. She just didn't know where to go and get it. And I don't.
Sure, but and Patrice, I don't mean to speak into your story, but a lot of
Mhm.
church leaders have been telling you that you should be yearning for something.
Mm.
The
Oh,
what if we don't need to be yearning for anything? I'm all for holding on to hope. I'm all for personal spirituality. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But what worries me is when people are traumatized by what I call cult leaders who have created neuropaths in their brain to make them feel like, oh, because I don't have the same thing I had as this child, this like expectation that there's something greater than me looking out for me. If I'm not engaging with that mysterious, ambiguous thing, that I'm somehow failing in some sort of way. I don't see that as failure at all, personally.
Well, I'm so sorry if it came out like I was trying to judge her. I'm not. It's more like it's more like
I
this.
was hearing you judge yourself, Devanin. That's what I was hearing.
Oh, well, that I did really, really, really for a long time. I blame myself for what happened at church, and that's no joke. I really, really did. But no, it wasn't meant to be like a badgering at all. It's more like a conscious thing.
mhm.
Most people believe we have a soul or a spirit or something like that. And so if the church was feeding you and you take that away, then what? You know, like you said, it was a void. What do we like? What do we fill it with? It has to be some sort of other religious education. Now you can Google a lot of things. There's videos everywhere. There's all kinds of ways that you can go and learn. And so,
Wait, I agree with you in that you feel the void, and John, you're correct. I shouldn't have to feel this way, but you still have to live in a world where, you have brothers and sisters that are still in the religion that seem to want to question you. People love to question, why did you leave? Or why aren't you going to church? You know, everything that happens to you in your book, Divine, and you're seeing people reap what they sow. No, because I've left, every bad thing that has happened to me, the first thing people go to, they handle it. Oh, it's because you left the church. Now, that's not the same thing you say when I have something great in my life. So something good in my life, you don't tell me, oh, it's because I left the church. So you feel that, yearning to be a part of something because everybody else is a part of something and you're left alone. So you're like on the outside, always looking in, like you don't have that religion or that crux. I want to put it as it is, the crux or the crutch to hold on to that everybody else has. I feel like the one-legged person in the two-legged race because I don't have something to stand upon. I just don't have that solid base. And they do make you feel guilty that you are not in a religion. Because if you look at everywhere you go, sorry, John, but if you look at everywhere you go, the first thing you do if you go to the hospital, what religion are you? So are you judging me because of my religion? No, they're judging you because they need to know what your practices are. Okay. So if I have none, they tend to look at you to ask you, well, what will you? They're still seeking out something from you. So you are not a whole person until you have a religion to stand behind. And I know you said, there's like cults and stuff, which I do read upon, but everything basically stands upon religion. And if you don't have it, you're near ostracized from the rest of the world. Because in politics, you have, in your book, you're saying like the Republicans, they want to stand oh God, I forgot what you call them, Divine. And what did you call in your book? The
I,
Christians, some type of Christian, you know. So if you're not Republican with like that type of Christian mentality, you're kind of Democratic with a different mentality. So everywhere it comes into play. So when you don't have it, you feel like a castaway.
mhm.
So that is where I have that constant feeling, that void that you always feel is your lost connection with the rest of the world who've basically put themselves into different religions to garner respect, wealth, or power or whatever. So I'm feeling the void because I can't identify. That's my best word. I can't identify who
Okay.
I am to everybody else.
We're-
And, like the minute somebody says they're agnostic, people basically, in our religion, in Catholic religion, they're not going to want to accept you or even speak to you. And there's so much wealth of knowledge. You can come to us and change our mind or instruct us or teach us or help us understand. It's a big, it's bigger than, it's really big. It's really, really big.
Really quick,
And
Patrice, I'm glad you brought up the word identity because Savannah, when I was reading your book, I really kind of that was what I really thought it was about more than anything, was about identity because frankly, when I read it, it's the title is "Don't Call Me a Christian," and then I felt like I was reading a summation of what Christianity is. And so I'm very interested as to your identity when it comes to, was that like front of mind when you were writing the book?
Thank you for that question. And after I answer this, if you want to say anything about your parting from the church, then go ahead and then, okay. So my point is to get people to break away from terminology because what happens is we can get too caught up on what a word is supposed to mean and let the definition of the word carry far too much weight than what it actually does. So that means if Karen is a Christian, she'll go around saying she's a Christian. She won't make gay people wedding cakes and she'll kick certain people out, but she'll be like, hey, I'm a Christian. See, Christian is an action word, is a word of love. It's not just like a word. So whether you were ever called a Christian or not, if you live like Christ, then you are one of his children. It's not about the word. It is about identity, like you were saying, but we can identify with the whole Trinity without being called a Christian.
I don't know if that's true. Only because this is what I would say in general. Because first off, I very much empathize. Like my last days as a Christian, I would have eaten this book up for sure. Because this was literally my position. Was I believe these core things about Christianity. I'm sick of the church. I'm sick of all the garbage, right? And so I was like, I had that feeling that a lot of good people who are Christians have when the conversation one way or another ends up in a place where you have to identify as a Christian and you don't want to. That is a thing that happens. And so I kind of did it begrudgingly. I was like, maybe I can go back to saying I follow the way. Maybe I can do, I think you like the term Christ follower, right? So like I had a lot of those same thoughts and feelings. Here's the problem. I'll do it by way of example. If let's say a cop says the guy who murdered George Floyd isn't a real cop. Well, then that just dodges accountability, right? Because now he's just saying, oh, he's not a real cop. I don't particularly enjoy men, cis men specifically. I don't enjoy cis men culture in general, but I am a cis man by every functional definition, right? I could certainly identify somewhere else and there would be definitions and things that would go along with that. But in general, just because I might not like that culture or whatever, it doesn't necessarily change who I am. So sometimes when I'm reading what you're writing, I'm like, well, you're describing the Christian faith is something you believe. So how can I not call you a Christian if you're describing essentially Christianity?
Because I don't go to churches. When you think of Christians, you automatically think of like a physical building. You know, I prefer to be called like a believer than a Christian, but I get what you're saying. If I've checked all the boxes, check, 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 then how can you do this and say you're not a Christian? I get that, but I don't want to be called one because of how much pain that word causes people. There was one time I was talking to this lady I just met, and I think this was the last time I told somebody that I'm a Christian. She paused, got like super uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if the conversation was going to even be able to continue. And she was like, are you the good kind or like the mean kind? And right then I realized people have like this is a triggering word. If people haven't personally been hurt by the church like us, then they probably know someone who has. And so I don't want that word to drive a wedge in between my witness to somebody else or the work that I'm doing because I'm insistent upon being called it. And that's really why I divorced the word.
Sure, but like a lot of cops hate the word cop. They say I'm a law enforcement officer. So like it's that's great. They want to they understand there's a problem or whatever and they want to distance themselves from it, but that doesn't really change anything systematic, right? Like it doesn't actually deal with the issue. At least my perception is it's not dealing with the issues of Christianity. Because and this is a personal thing that we're obviously free to disagree on. But for me, I'm like, no, the actual mechanics, the actual theology, like ideas of the Trinity, ideas of, sin are like part of the cult structure. Like that's part of what does the damage, not just some Christians who were mean sometimes. So that's just kind of the crux of what I was feeling when I read the book is I know you. I know you're a loving person. I know you're a good person. Personally, I think you'd be a good person whether you were a Christian or not. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just waving, thank you.
Yeah. And so since I know that about you, like I see this as like an identity issue where you're like, I just don't want the identity of Christian because I don't identify with these Christians. And that's fine. It that makes labeling in general, I'm also not a fan of. But at the end of the day, we have to have some labels for legal reasons, for like conversational reasons and those kind of things. So I didn't know if I was spotting that correctly or if there was something else you were trying to do with the book.
Mm. I wanted to use that title to get people's defenses down so that they would be open to a conversation about the Trinity. Now, I left the church, but I didn't go as far as you to stop believing in God and everything like that. As we discussed when I had you on my show the last time, I've had too much miraculous stuff happen to me, which I believe. And so for me, it's important that I just never, ever, ever have a barrier because I had a dream years ago. And it's like God was teaching me like how to soul win in this dream. And he was telling me that in order to win someone's soul, to get a convert, if you will, is that you have to get on the same page with him. You have to have a common ground, not show up, knock on their door and say, I'm right, you're wrong, change. You have to get on the same level. And so that word was coming in between my ability to do it. I've seen so many people be just devastated by that word. And so I thought, maybe I can package this differently. What you're saying, the institutions hurt people, not necessarily the word. My call to action is for people to leave the church if you've been hurt than to sit there thinking you have to. You can still have a perfectly good relationship with God. I still choose Christ. And so since we probably got like maybe like 10 minutes left, I'm not going to go through each chapter title, or we're not going to go through each chapter and discuss it. What I'm curious is what part stood out to y'all.
For me, you went pretty deep into Christianity. And at some point, I actually did not see Catholicism in it, which is just weird. I'm reading stuff that I never touched upon, never saw, did not engage while I was in the Catholic religion. So yours was deep and very profound in that Christianity to me sounds like it's supposed to be the whole mantle. We're supposed to be, trying to, or maybe the umbrella was supposed to go up underneath. But Catholicism fell along the wayside. It didn't get covered up in Christianity because we're not as engaged as a Christian is. I don't know if that makes sense. Learned from young, we were told a Catholic is a soldier of Christ, the believers in Christ. But we do not delve into depth that you delve down in the book. So it was like eye-opening for me, all the different verses and chapters that you relating to when you engaging in the book. that I didn't even know about. So, it's like maybe I should change religions, go to a different team. Maybe if I had that opportunity younger, who knows where I might have been now? You know, who knows if I had taken a different path? Would I have actually engaged more? Would I have been, more interested in it? I'm just at the path where I'm not. So, the part of the book that I liked is when you say I needed for God to, I needed to invite God. I needed to embrace him. I needed to engage. I needed to emulate, and I needed to behave in a certain way. I never got that from my Catholic teaching. I got nothing. I got emptiness. Just whatever was said, passed down was whatever that person, what their limitation on the religion was, is what I was instructed. So if they have 4%, then now I might have 1. Then I now have to pass on what little I have to a child and tell them, you've got to believe whatever I just said. No, I couldn't even bring anything else to the table to say, well, this is the meaning of it. So that's what I kind of really liked about the book, is that you really allowed me to delve into Christianity, which is not what the Catholic Church allows. We call it something different. We used to call people who call themselves Christians, we used to call them born again Christian. So it's like saying you won't really, it's like old money and new money. That's my best interpretation of what Catholics look at with Christian. We believe Christians who quote verses as new money type of people who just came along to religion, and we think we are the whole stalwart of religion, that we hold the vault of religion. So when you say you're Christian, we tend to want to look at you differently, if that makes sense.
It
That's
does.
the identity you were talking about.
Right. It makes perfect sense. Identity is everything. John, what was your favorite part?
I'm still so hung up on this idea of that I was already harping on. So I'm trying to get my brain into a different gear. But frankly, like, it was kind of hard for me to read because it's Christianity. I didn't see anything particularly new for me because I mean, and I'm glad the information's out there. What I will say this, I like how succinct you were able to cover a lot of ground very quickly, which is hard to do with this stuff. The only problem is I feel like there's information that I don't agree with that I think is just Christian rhetoric and Christian versions of things. The biggest one in that department was just when you were talking about sin. I don't think I don't think we agree on how sin works at all, or even its existence in the same way. But yeah, I mean, again, I thought you did a good summation of Christianity. The thing that I want to just circle back to very quickly is I actually have kind of a problem with sneaking Christianity into the conversation under other guises, repackaging it. This has been done for years. The way when the first and second Great Awakening in the US, the way the gospel was presented was very different than how the gospel is presented now. It was very different than how the gospel was presented in the first 500 years of Christianity. Have a very different version of presenting the gospel than Protestants do. Presenting the shtick in different ways, even if the way sounds really nice, does not give me comfort. It makes me scared that there's an ulterior motive. Now I know you, and I know your motives are pure. I know it's because you have a heart for people who are hurting, and especially people who have been hurt by the church. And so to me, I see that in the writing as well, that this is communicating to them. I just still see that fundamental problem of this still serves a system that is bigger than Devanon's love for people. This is still the same rhetoric that's in church. It's just packaged slightly differently. And so that's just kind of my final critique is I can read this as a man identifying his faith in very clear, less Christianese type terms, but it is still the Christian faith through and through.
Well, I mean, that was pretty much the point. I wasn't trying to rewrite the Bible. I wasn't trying to rewrite Christianity. The point was to say it succinctly and in a different way. Because, sometimes, two different people can tell the one individual the same thing. That one individual
Mhm.
might not understand the first person, but they might get it from the second person just because it was explained differently. Good. And so then that's all it was. That's why it's a free book. You can just download it for free. you know,
No,
it's
but can I say something just back to John? I completely see what you're saying, but for me reading the book, this was, as they say, the introduction to Christianity for a Catholic. Being, I always keep saying I identify as being Roman Catholic because I'm born there, grew up in it, will die in it, but never had this level of interpretation into Christianity. I don't read much, I don't engage much because I was never really interested. So reading Devanan's book was actually a glimmer into Christianity. As he said, his interpretation, it could reach different people. So as you said, you could repackage it. But for me, this is like nearly like the first packaging of Christianity. So for me, there's an absolute divide between Christianity and and being Catholic. We are so different. We are a completely different beast, as they would see, as you'd say Muslim is, as Buddhist. Catholics, we believe we are the end all and we're the be all and the end all. So to now realize there is Christianity, it is nearly, for somebody my age, it's nearly like mind blowing. Would I continue along the path of trying to find out more about Christianity? I don't know. But, I love what you said. And I also like the book the Vernon is opening up. So for you, it's repackage it. But for me, it's like it's like the first step. It's the first step into real religion is to hear how everything evolved. And interpretation is all about it. So as I said at the beginning, it has evolved and changed and changed and changed. And we don't know who has the real holy grail of the Bible. We don't know what was originally there. We have got versions and descendants of the same book, but we could choose which one we want to go to.
at
And
the
that's what we've done over time.
Thank you very much for that, Patrice. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to like take the place of God. I don't think any church should. My website doesn't with the lessons and the education we have on there.
Mhm.
One of my greatest prayers is for God to reveal himself to people on an individual basis in a way that that individual person is going to know that it is God speaking to them. Like with the angels that come and talk to me, with the dreams that I have and things like that. It is impossible for me to deny the existence of God. So I ask God to give people irrefutable proof of his existence apart from the Bible. And
Right.
Okay, I got one last thing I have to say to stay on brand. So my whole thing, right? Like I'm a host of a podcast called The Cult of Christianity. My whole life's work is to dissect. Well, it started as dissecting Christianity. It's moved on to dissecting cults. It is Patrice, I totally understand Catholics do not encourage education. That's not their shtick. There are many, Christianity is a huge umbrella with many, there's very progressive Christians, there's very fundamentalist conservative Christians,
Mhm.
there's Catholics, there's Eastern Orthodox, there's offshoots left and right. Here's the only warning I'll give. It is so easy to go from one cult to another. This is something that happens with a lot of people.
Mhm.
Is because they've been given a cult mindset, a cult follower mindset. They realize that what they were in is a cult. For you, it might have been Catholicism. For someone else, it could be something completely different.
Mhm.
and then they go find another cult. Now, this doesn't always mean like a religious institution. Sometimes this can be, a very toxic group that goes to a bar. This can be get caught up just in a different world. This can look, in my opinion, a lot of people who leave Christianity join cults online that just talk crap about Christianity all the time, and that's like where they find their community, and then people take advantage of them by selling them books about how bad Christianity is. I've put in a lot of work to not be that kind of ex-Christian and gone to therapy and talked about these things to make sure that I'm never a cult leader again. So the only warning I'll give is that yearning you were talking about earlier. It's totally human. It's a normal emotion. It is so amplified when you grow up in a cult that you have needs, that you have these needs that to be saved. That's the indoctrination. You have this need to be saved. So whatever you believe is your personal choice, and you need freedom in that. And I appreciate Devanon's approach that he wants people to have that very individualistic thing. The only thing I'll say is just no one's got all the answers. Don't believe anyone who says they do, especially Christians, because they've been lying longer than about anybody about a lot of things. And so that's just my cautionary tale of it's okay for personal discovery. I'm all for people figuring out their identity. Don't join cults. They will only do damage to you and the ones you love.
Here,
Yeah.
we can agree on that. So
Yeah.
before we get into wrap up, I'm just gonna read a couple of chapter titles just so people can get a feel for it. Again, like I said, this is a free book. It doesn't cost you anything at all. This is at my website, sexdrugsandjesus.com. You can download it and just take it and do with it what you will. Let's see. Like what is Christ-like living is one. Spiritual Christians versus the church. Can we get along? Things like that. And so basically this book takes you from like the history of Christianity through politics, through interpretations and transliterations to where we are today. It's super short, it's super succinct, and I also had to keep it short so that I could keep people's attention span. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up was this quote by Mahatma Gandhi that I included in the book, and he says, "I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." That kind of was a huge inspiration behind this. What do y'all think he meant?
John, you go ahead.
Well, Gandhi was not a perfect person, to be very clear. There's some really problematic things about Gandhi. But what I will say is this is Frederick Douglass also said a quote very similar where he said, I forget the exact words, but paraphrased, it was something to the effect of, I don't believe in American Christianity. That was his thing. So I think what he meant was pretty self-explanatory in the sense that Christ, the legend, as I interpret him, I don't view what the Gospels say about Jesus as historical fact necessarily. But as far as the mythology of who we understand the character of Jesus to be in the world, what he represents is this idea of loving everyone. What he represents is this idea of no matter how broken you are, you can be made whole again. And that aligned with Gandhi in the sense that he cared about broken people and people who were outcast, right? That is very different than how Christianity has ever been from 380 to now. And so I think Gandhi spotted it, and I don't think it's very hard to spot that when your figurehead of your religion is someone who is willing to die even when wrongfully convicted, when you have a character who would talk to people that no one else was willing to talk to, according to legend. That is different than anyone who's identified as Christian, which I assume is why Devanon wants to get away from that identity somewhat, because you probably like the Christ, you like that narrative, but it's not what you see. And so I think that's what Gandhi was saying, and I don't think you have to look far to agree with him.
Well said, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. I have nothing. I have nothing. That was really well said. As you say, he's just saying, I think what Gandhi's just trying to say is, I like your figurehead. I just don't like your followers.
It's all very interesting to me because, Christ was not called a Christian. This word came about, you know,
Mhm,
after he was gone, and it came about because people needed a way to divide the new followers from the old followers, essentially.
mhm.
And so, I just don't want people to get hung up on the word. I want people to have a meaningful relationship with God that is, outside of the Bible, outside of a building. That is my call to action, because when the pastor inevitably makes a mistake, a religion could fall. Then what are you going to do? Like, identity has to be a relationship with Jesus, just with Jesus, with no one else around. I'll say this and I'll shut up. Like, your most, your most powerful and meaningful time with God is supposed to be when you're by yourself, not when you're in the middle of a room full of people.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
And I think that's perfect.
and so
That's
with that,
perfect.
any last words y'all have for the world, y'all can just say so, and then I'll intro y'all out.
Well, I just like what John said at the end about community, in that instead of moving from the Catholic Church into something, it's like you're moving and just having different bed partners. So you just go from one to the next, to the next. So that's why actually have not sought out any other religion. I just kind of stopped seeking and started enjoying life. And wherever it takes me, it's where I go. You know, love, laughter, light. That's all it's supposed to be. Can't get hung up about, religion, race, age, you know, medical condition. I'm just not there. I'm just not there. So if I need to sit in the middle of a room by myself and just thank God for something, I don't have to feel ashamed. I don't have to go into a church and, say everything to the mountaintops. No, it's now just about me and my thoughts. That's where my is stored. It's in my thoughts and what I do. So if I do something good, I feel good. If I've done something bad, I feel human. That's just where it is. So my community is just me.
You are where you are, and that's okay.
Yep. Yep.
What about you, Johnny?
You can go to the cultofchristianity.com and spend 5 bucks. No, I'm not talking. No, I want to tell people that there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to hold on to what you have believed. There's nothing wrong with wanting to search for a new belief, and we all have beliefs. The only thing that will always be my caution is, are your beliefs truly your own? And investigate the hell out of that, because there are so many things that you might think are your own that are not, that were given to you and probably forced into you. And so just be very wary of that as you're seeking whatever you're seeking.
Yeah, that's true. As he said, be just cognizant of what you're introducing into you, and don't let it be a part of what was taught to you. So it shouldn't be learned behavior. It should just be something that you really believe in. Because most of religion is learned behavior.
Well, not anymore, because
All I got.
we kids are going to be mindful about our religion, our approach to spirituality, and everything else that we do. We're going to know why we believe what we believe. That is what it comes down to. All right, like John was saying, y'all, his podcast is The Cult of Christianity, and
Okay.
it is thecultofchristianity.com. That's going to go in the show notes along with John's link tree. And what can I say? Thank y'all for spending a whole hour of your life with me that I know that you can't get back. Too bad we didn't get to talk about Tyler Perry, but we might just have to do this again.
Yes, I would love that.
Say goodbye, everyone.
Okay, bye. Nice
Class-
meeting you, John. Bye, Vernon. Talk to you soon.
Class,
Okay, bye.
class dismissed. Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, You can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Feel free to reach out to me directly at Savannah, sexdrugsandjesus.com, and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Savannah, and it's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.